Welcome to this e-learning on AutoStore OpenForms 360, the intelligent capture process automation tool from Nuance Document Imaging. In this course, we'll look at a number of elements. Firstly, we'll look at the business pains associated with dealing with multiple types of documents and data. Secondly, we'll look at the ways of automating business processes and the benefits that they can give. We'll look at the solution overview of the automated business processes with AutoStore and OpenForms 360 available from Nuance Document Imaging. We'll go through some process examples where we look at different document types being processed through the system and the types of data that is extracted. We'll look at the license overview of OpenForms 360 to give you a better understanding of the licensing aspects. And finally, we'll look at some business use cases so to give you a better understanding of where intelligent capture with AutoStore and OpenForms 360 can fit in. Let's look at the business pains that are faced by most companies. These include data input overload. Companies are still receiving thousands of documents per day into the business in paper and electronic format. We may have moved away from standard mail to email, but companies are still receiving documentation and documents in both paper and electronic format. These need to be processed and stored in the relevant business systems as quickly as possible, allowing the business to be efficient and compliant. In many companies, this can be a very time-consuming and manual process. Many corporations have multiple back-end systems. They're not fulfilled by one unified business systems. They're using multiple systems for their customer relationship management, their financial systems, their human resource systems, contract management, and order and fulfillment systems. And getting business assets of data and documentation into each of these systems can be time-consuming when there's no unified approach. And often, the actual entry of data and documentation is repeated multiple times as it's entered into multiple systems. Companies are still very dependent on manual data entry. Entry clerks enter vast amounts of information into the back-end systems to ensure that all of the relevant systems have the correct information, whether that's entering information taken from an invoice, a shipping notice, a delivery note, a purchase order, or human resources, application forms, etc. Most of the time this is done by reading the data from the document and retyping it. It's a time-consuming process and vastly expensive. These pain points can be addressed by automating business processes, enabling a business to function more efficiently. The benefits of automation are quite straightforward. By using automation, a company can reduce the operating costs. They're automating manual tasks, reducing the need for rekeying data into multiple systems, deploying it via secure capture processing platform, which also reduces the paper filing and storage requirements, as the information is stored securely as digital images. Once data is stored as digital, then data can be extracted and used within the business process, improving the information sharing within the business and leveraging the common sets of business rules within the corporations. This allows for a reduction of errors and a reduction in the need to re-enter and rekey multiple pieces of information into multiple systems. This leads to the acceleration of business processes, shortening the processing time and the reduction of exception processing, enhancing the customer relationship within the business, improving productivity, efficiency, and in most cases, cash flow. Compliance is a major element as the world becomes more and more security conscious. By digitizing and having automated business processes, you improve the visibility of data within the business process while increasing the security and data protection of that data, ensuring compliance and auditability within the data. The value proposition that is actually presented for intelligent capture with AutoStore and OpenForms 360 is a vast one. The ability of AutoStore to collect documents and data and business information from multiple sources such as multifunction devices, network scanners, electronic files via the desktop clients of AutoCapture, Web Capture and the imports, and the smart devices using Nuance Business Connect and high-speed scanners with Quick Capture Pro allow data and documentation to be captured quickly, efficiently and securely into AutoStore. AutoStore takes that data and passes it to OpenForms 360, an add-on to AutoStore. This has the ability to use automated processes of optical character recognition, intelligent character recognition, and intelligent document recognition to understand, recognize, separate, classify and type documents and extract data from those documents. This information, as extracted metadata, can be returned back to AutoStore as runtime replacement tags and used within AutoStore business processes to help businesses alleviate the need for re-enter, to help businesses design automated business processes which make decisions based on the extracted data. Once this process has been completed, then the ultimate storage of the data and documentation into multiple backend systems can be achieved through one path. Whether that system is an ERP system, a CRM system, a finance system, electronic health record system, or any other system via AutoStore's open connectivity. AutoStore and OpenForms provide the optimization of capture workflows in any industry with all types of forms, providing the method to capture the document and the data and create the business asset into the business, providing validated electronic documentation, reducing manual keying of and entry of data, enabling process automation, digital workflows, which in turn increase efficiency and reduce costs. There's a number of use cases and availabilities within this intelligent capture space. A few here are things like digital mailroom, capturing the post that comes in to a business and allowing it to be captured, identified, sorted and routed to the relevant person or department as quickly as possible. Accounts payable. Every business receives numerous supplier invoices into their business. All these invoices need sorting, capturing and entering into the back-end finance systems to allow the business to transact. Application forms, be they HR forms for people applying for jobs, or application forms to open a bank account, get a credit agreement, or any other method requiring application, can be read and processed through the system with data extracted. Exam papers. Most exam boards across EMEA are still very reliant on paper-based exam papers. These exam papers can be digitized and sent out for marking as a digital format rather than a paper format, providing additional security. With the answers, especially to multiple choice exams, quickly extracted, checked, marked and responded to. Other types of forms could be finance and banking forms, patient records, tax returns, various questionnaires and guest registrations. AutoStore's main capabilities are the ability to capture from any source, whether that capture is a document or data, and provide secure information exchange. Capturing from a desktop PC via AutoCapture or Web Capture, from a smart MFP with an embedded client, an ISIS or a Twain scanner using Quick Capture Pro, mobile devices or smart devices using Nuance Business Connect, or capturing from file import or email import via the file import processes. Capture can be done from any data source, providing a tight, secure integration method into business processes. Capturing paper or electronic documents or just information. Converting hard copy originals into the latest Word, Excel or PPT formats, or archiving them in the standard PDF-A formats. providing smart workflows that are easy to roll out with personalized scan menus that stop the unauthorized flow of sensitive information, providing a secure and agile capture solution. When we add to AutoStore's functionality with the features and functions that come with the AutoStore add-ons of OpenForms 360 and the components within AutoStore, we add to that the ability for automated document recognition, the processing of structured, semi-structured and unstructured documents, automated document separation and recognition via barcodes or document characteristics, the processing of data via electronic forms and extraction from back-end systems to build complete forms, and the processing of that data integrated to the back-end line of business systems for data and image transfer based on the user and system requirements, provide the best possible approach for secure information exchange of documents and business data. Let's look now at a solution overview of what we actually get when we actually use AutoStore and OpenForms 360 add-in. The OpenForms 360 add-in provides the ability for automated recognition of documents, providing automated document separation, classification and data extraction based on methods of the nature of the document. The ability to actually capture all different types of documents in one batch by scanning at an MFP or capturing through a file import, desktop import or mobile import allows us to capture multiple documents, identify them and decide how to process each different document type from the single click of a button. Document types that can be processed by AutoStore and the OpenForms 360 add-on fall into three distinct categories. We're all very familiar with structured documents. These are the type of forms that we generally have to fill in when we're applying for something, whether that's applying for a passport, a driving license, applying for a bank account, closing a bank account or making changes to our bank accounts. Generally, we see these type of structured forms. They're forms where elements are always in fixed locations. The layout of the form is known in advance and very rarely changes. So we can actually use zonal type OCR technologies to read that information, or ICR technology to read it if it is handprint. The other type of documentation that we're all very familiar with is semi-structured documents. These are typical business documents, purchase orders, delivery notes, invoices, etc. These are semi-structured. The information on the document is never in the same place, as it relies on the company generating the document to decide on the layout that's best fits for them. But these documents generally follow layout patterns based on a rule of information. The information, unlike forms, is never in a static region, but rules can be applied to understand how to read information from these documents. For example, invoices the world over follow a standard rule base. They generally all tell you who the invoices come from. They all have an invoice date, have an invoice number so that you can reference it, and have information about what you actually owe, maybe the total amount and the currency that it comes from. So using those standard rules, we can define systems to actually identify where that information is on the semi-structured document and extract the relevant information. The third type of document is unstructured documents. Again, many of these exist in business environments. They follow no standardized pattern. They're typical examples. A typical example of an unstructured document may be correspondence, maybe contracts, anything which actually is not defined to a standard layout pattern as a structured document or a semi-structured document. But they do tend to follow information where semantic patterns can actually be used to guide the search of information. Correspondence, although never in the same format, do have various elements that could be found on the thing. The salutation, the signatory, the address of who's sending it in, for example. Other information can be used in unstructured documents to identify them based on building a repository of classification information to decide on what type of document an unstructured document is. When we actually go into the document recognition and classification, it's made up of 4 general steps. When we're actually capturing documents or a batch of documents where the documents may well be all different types of documents, we need to capture them and split the documents up using separation. That separation is done using information based on the features of that document. Using those features, we also use those to actually classify and create the document type. This is the identification of what the document is and what it means to the business, whether that's a purchase order, an invoice, a contract, an application, or just plain correspondence, for example. We need to understand the features of those documents to enable the classification into a document type. Once we know the document type, then extraction can take place, searching and extracting the relevant business data from the document. Whether that's extracting the invoice-based information from an invoice, the purchasing information from a purchase order, or the job applicant's details from a job application form, the extraction is based on the document type classification. Once data is extracted, it can then be interpreted to enhance the extracted data with context-relevant information, perhaps looking up the vendor of an invoice to get the vendor ID from your ERP system, or looking up the address of a person to find out the client number for a letter coming into a legal practice, for example. We'll now look at elements of each of these and how it actually works, and we'll start with document separation. Document separation can be done in a number of ways. AutoStore in its own right has a number of these methods, but AutoStore and OpenForms together increase the methods of allowing us to understand the documents. In the example shown here on screen, we have 5 pages that were captured at the same time. In a lot of instances, in this type of environment, we may well have actually printed off barcode separator sheets to put between these documents before they were put in the scanner, or patch codes, or we may know that actually everything we are capturing is a separate individual pages, so we split on a single page. Those processes are ideal when you understand what the document size is in the number of pages, or you have the time and ability to actually separate the documents out and split them and add some form of separation document. But what we're looking at with process automation is to remove the human element from the need to prepare documents for capture and processing. So we want to remove the need to add barcode separation page, patch code separation page, or blank code page separation. And we do that by using the features of a document or the content of the document to decide based on rules what the document is. So in the example here, we look at the document and decide document 1, based on the information we have on it, is an invoice. Document 2 is correspondence, and document 3 is a contract. And we can split that based on the features of each document. Document 1 having the information that actually identifies it as an invoice. Document 2 having information that actually identifies it as an unstructured correspondence, the fact that it actually has a salutation and a signature section. And document 3, the fact that it has basic information about a contract. We do the classification of all those documents to identify the document type, and there are several ways to determine the document class or type, and these can be combined, and generally for better classification rules they tend to be. The simplest form of document identification is what we've all been doing for quite some time. They're making the use of form IDs or barcodes, and these can still be used to classify documents, because if they're there, they're generally the fastest and most secure way of doing it. But they're not always there, so we now need to look at other ways. And we tend to use rule-based classification, and that's a set of classification rules based around graphical objects, phrases and combinations of phrases and keywords that appear on the document at least at some location to make a decision as to what the document is. So for example, an invoice may have the word invoice on it. Order may have the words purchase order or order on it. Application forms may have account application, student application, job application, for example. So these can be used to define phrases and combinations of phrases or the features of the document to actually use rule-based classification. Where it becomes difficult to actually use rule-based classification is when we're dealing with unstructured documents, where there may not be something as simple as the word invoice appears because it's an invoice, or the word order appears because it's an order. We may be looking at correspondence, and correspondence may be talking about an invoice or talking about an order, so we can't identify it just simply on that. So what we can add to the system is adaptive classification technology, a process of learning via samples of documents for each class and teaching the system to use the characteristics of each document to identify the type of document or subtype of document and build up a classification profile. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Once we've actually classified the document into a document type, we can then move on and actually extract data from the document. Data extraction uses the OCR, ICR and IDA technologies to extract information from the document page. And we can extract various pieces of information from the document. We can read barcodes and patch codes. We can look for OMR marks, tick boxes, for example, which you might find in an application form, an exam form, etc., or multi-choice, or an event registration form. We can do forms reading. On structured forms, we can use fixed location. On semi-structured forms, we can use an anchored location where we look for something in relation to the piece of information we actually want to extract. Once we've used those fixed or anchor locations, we can extract the information either using handprint recognition or machine print recognition. We also have the ability to use database-driven recognition. So for example, searching for client information using an address database, or vendor information on your supplier invoices using your vendor database extracted from the ERP system, ensuring that invoices are identified as the correct vendor by identifying pieces of information that are stored in the vendor database on the invoice, not just looking for a logo or a company name. We also have the ability to add adaptive reading technology, enhancing the rules-based extraction with the ability to teach the system various aspects of a document where a rule may not be able to apply for that simple subtype of a document for that extraction field, and allowing the document to be taught where to find it specifically on that document type. Data extraction and freeforms extraction follows a standard step of processes. The OCR engine, the optical character recognition, converts the image into a machine readable format. This is then analysed using the intelligent character recognition to locate meaningful elements and tag them, to understand that a date is a date, a word is a word, and a number is a number. Once we understand these meaningful elements, we can then use the process to extract information, find the correct date among all those detected based on an anchor point piece of information. For example, finding the order date on an invoice based on the phrase order date and finding the date beneath. We can then normalize the fields. For in this example, the order date extracted has come from an American invoice, and our system, when we post it to our ERP system, is in European format. Therefore, we can normalize the date from the US format of month, day, year into a European format of day, month, and year with century. We can also verify the element. So that, for example, verifying the date is within a valid period. If it's not within a valid period, then the date extracted could not have been correct. And we can check that against business rules and validity rules within OpenForms and the AutoStore process. The process used of recognition is very different to what you may have seen. Form-based recognition is the simplest form of recognition, and it requires the building of templates based recognition. So you take a document type from each supplier. For example, you would take your invoices from each supplier and build a template for each supplier on how their invoice format is based. The recognition rate that you're getting from a production system slowly increases in steps as each template is taught to the system or defined within the system. Freeform recognition, which is where we start with the AutoStore and OpenForms process, is the ability to create rules to understand where data is on the document based on that rule and look for the information. This gives us a great starting point and a high recognition rate as an initial process. Adaptive learning technology, where the system is taught by the processing of thousands of sample documents, starts with a zero recognition rate. The system understands nothing at the point it starts and learns over a period of time as you give it more and more documents and teach it what the system is. What we do with an OpenForms 360 installation with AutoStore is combine the freeform technology and the adaptive technology. So we start at a high recognition rate and use the adaptive technology to increase that recognition rate further when the freeform recognition rate is starting to level out. The adaptive technologies that are actually available within the OpenForms products feature two types of technology. One based on classification and one based on the reading of the document. The adaptive classification technology module is a self-learning classification for semi-structured and unstructured document. It uses the context of the document and not the layout. Samples can be added to increase the recognition rate. It interacts with the extraction classify module. There's no technical skills required to train a document, and advanced analyzing techniques are used to comprehend the trained samples to increase the confidence thresholds to define a safe class results. The adaptive classification technology module allows you to pass multiple documents into the process, classify them by telling it what type of document that is by either telling it through the training client or importing from an existing document structure, and it will identify the documents, use the context to build up a registry of information to allow it to identify what the document actually is. This module is used purely for the classification of documents into the document types. Adaptive read technology is used to enhance the recognition rate within OpenForms 360. Rules-based or free-form recognition is generally used for most fields, but where a field cannot be found due to rules, maybe because there's actually nothing around it to allow it to identify it, then the art base can be used to work on the layout base and improve recognition rates of individual fields. For example, you may be processing supplier invoices, and although most of your invoices are identified using the standard fields of invoice date, invoice number, etc., you may find an invoice supplier actually produces an invoice where the invoice number is just a number in the top left hand corner of the document, for example. The simplest way to teach it is to use the adaptive reading technology to tell it that actually, of all the fields that you can't extract the invoice number because the invoice number is here. Use this location for this document type and this layout every time you see it. Once data has been extracted, there is the ability to use the data validation client. The data validation client is designed to allow a user to validate what has been extracted. They are only validating against what is shown on the document to what the machine has identified, to ensure that what has been extracted is what's on the document. Ensuring the data that is extracted is correct before it is passed back into AutoStore and the business processes and used to perhaps populate accounts payable systems, timesheet systems, or run business processes where the data is identified and used. The OpenForms system is made up of a number of components. If you're familiar with AutoStore, you know that AutoStore has capture, process, and route components. The OpenForms is an add-on to the AutoStore infrastructure. Within AutoStore itself, there is a route component that allows documents that have been captured and processed by AutoStore to be passed to the OpenForms 360 server. There is also a capture component available which takes data back from the OpenForms 360 server back into AutoStore with all the relevant metadata so it can be processed. The OpenForms 360 server controls the passage of documents and metadata within the extraction and validation processes within the OpenForms infrastructure, managing the conversations between AutoStore, the sitemap recognition, classification and extraction system, and the validation client before passing the data back to AutoStore via the OpenForms capture component. When the data comes back via the OpenForms capture component, all extracted data is available as RRTs or runtime replacement tags that can be used within AutoStore processes and used to populate and make decisions within the business processes. There is also a number of general metadata type information that can come back. For example, the document type that the document was classified against will come back. The project name, the batch ID, the date and time, etc. of when the document was processed. All this information can be used as standard within AutoStore to allow AutoStore to make decisions, to run processes, and to feed the data into backend systems. Let's look at some example business processes. We're going to look at 3 examples of business processes. We're going to look at invoice processing, where the header information such as invoice date, invoice number, values such as the total, the net and the VAT amount, as well as the vendor of the invoice are extracted from the process. We're going to look at a forms processing element where information that is handwritten on a form is extracted from a bank account closure form. And we're going to look at unstructured document processing where correspondence from various clients is captured. The client information is extracted and the documents are stored in the client information file. Let's look at invoice processing. We can capture a document using any of the AutoStore capture processes, whether that's an MFP client, an auto capture client, web capture client, or a smart device client using Nuance Business Connect. We capture the document, we identify the type of document that it is based on the invoice recognition. So as this is an invoice processing, we're going to look for the word invoice in most of the European languages. So in this case, we find the word invoice. So we've identified it as an invoice, which gives us our classification as a document type of invoice. Once we're classified, we pass it to the extraction module. The extraction module will then extract all the relevant invoice information from that document. The invoice number, the invoice date, the order reference, for example, the VAT or tax amount, the net amount, the VAT amount, the total amount, and identify the supplier that's actually sent that invoice. And in my example that I'll show you, we are then going to take that data, we're going to create a text file with the extracted data, take the image and store them in a process. We're going to use an element that's available within the OpenForms, which is what we call an invoice knowledge base. It's a black box of invoice processing module. It's been developed over a number of years and has extraction rules based on the development and verification based on a sample from more than 4,000 vendors across Europe, detailing over 400,000 invoices. Language samples have been taken from more than 25 countries, which gives us a recognition rate of up to 95% at a field level. The continuing refinement and based on field experience and vendor lookup make this a very adaptable process for invoice processing. As you can see in the example, we can extract the supplier information, the invoice number, the invoice date, order information, delivery note information, line items if required, net amount, the currency and the total amount. The invoicing module is supported in all these countries. in the languages of the country. So let's look at an example of this process running through. What we have is a number of invoices on the left hand side that have been captured into the process. So I'm going to use the AutoStore process, but let's first have a quick look at the invoices so you can see the type of invoice that's actually been captured. And purposely some of these have been captured a little bit crooked, but you can see the differences in the invoices. They're all different invoices, they're from different companies, they're different locations, etc. We're going to now pass all those invoices into the extraction process using the auto capture client. So we've created a process using auto capture which allows us to capture the invoices. So all those invoices have now been sent to the process. So in the background they're being processed and they will eventually arrive in the invoice extraction process. And the invoices will be extracted and stored based on the vendor ID, the vendor name, which will create a folder, and then from there we will then create a process. So what it's doing in the background is taking various pieces of information. It's identifying the vendor, it's identifying the invoice number, the invoice date, the total of the invoice, as well as the relevant information of net amount, and VAT percentage. The process is designed to actually send everything to a validation station. Now, in normal processes, the invoices would only be sent to the validation station when a field is actually below a confidence rating. In this demonstration, every invoice is being sent to the validation station. Let's look at the validation station. So this is the validation client. If we hit the refresh button, we'll see some invoices come through. You can see here we've got a batch of invoices that have come through that are ready to be validated. We can click on the first one and that will bring the information in, and we can see the document on the right hand side, and we can see each of the invoice fields that have been extracted. If we go into each of these fields, we can see that we've extracted that information. And the identified field, the empty field, is one that is identified in darker blue because it's empty. It's the field which is actually the lowest confidence rating. We can zoom into the document, and if we know where that piece of information is, we can actually point to it on the system and capture that information directly into the system. So in here we've found the invoice number, we can now validate it and move it forward. We can look at the same for each one of these invoices, and it will always jump to the empty field. In this case this is invoice total as expenses, and there aren't any expenses, so we can leave it empty. You can see here this invoice, there's a number of fields that are actually empty. So it's got the total amount which was there. It hasn't managed to get the net amount, so we can click on the net amount on the form. The VAT amount is obviously on the form somewhere else, so we can click on that field and move it, and we can also find the VAT rates. Once we've done that, we can move the invoices forward, and we can keep doing this till we're happy with the invoices that we've processed. And you can see each one of these then gets processed and pushed through the system. Once we've completed the validation of all the invoices, they'll then be passed back to AutoStore, and they can then be stored in the system. And if we look back at our invoices folder, we can now see that we've started to get a lot of invoices, invoice folders created based on the vendor ID number and the vendor. And if we look at each one of these, we can see the invoice itself, which we just open. We can show that this is an Irene Berger invoice, and we can see the data that's actually been extracted from that invoice: the document type, the invoice number, the date, the vendor number, the VAT amount, net amount, the VAT amount, the total amount, and the invoice currency. That was invoice processing. Now let's have a look at forms processing. With forms processing, we can do exactly the same. We can capture the form from anywhere we like. The form in this case is a bank closure form, bank account closure form, and you can see on here there's a number of fields that can actually be completed and filled in. We identify the form by looking for the form ID, which is in the top right hand corner on this. There's a box there you can't quite see, but it does say CLOBR, closure bank. Once we've identified it, we can then use the extraction module to find information. We'll extract the checkboxes, we'll extract the signature, we'll extract the bank account details. And in our example, we're going to create a text file with the information we extracted and create the image and store it in a folder. But obviously what we could be doing with this is passing this information back into a process where we identify the account details. We might identify the reason that they're closing it. And based on that reason, which in this case there are 9 on this form, based on one of those reasons, whichever one they've ticked, or perhaps multiple ones they've ticked, we could pass this document to a department that could talk to the customer about why they had that reason. Maybe, as the reasons show here, they've got reasons of policy, really of service. They didn't like the policy of the document that the bank took on the account. They didn't like the service they were getting. They could query that and discuss it. There's also a section in the middle where actually it's saying how do you want the funds paid, and obviously that could go to a different department, whether it's an internal transfer, an external transfer, international, or a check. And the final process, it could be actually checking whether the document is signed. If there's no signature present, or there should be 2 signatures because we've looked at the bank account that tells us it's a dual signature account, we could be looking for both accounts, both signatures, and if there's one missing, it could be sent to a signature processing department where they can contact the customer. The type of fields we can actually get from field processing are handprint extraction, barcode extraction, checkbox extraction, checking whether the boxes are ticked, and pixel count detection. So in this instance, checking if a signature field actually has something in it. The handprint extraction can read and extract handwritten text on structured forms. The handprint needs to be in clear process and preferably in some sort of split form as it is in this, although it can be read in the other areas on this document as the writing is clear. But the comb type form, or the box type, structured box type form, ensures that only one character is put in each box and forces a person writing the form to avoid cursive writing. So we look at this forms processing demo. The same thing as the previous one. I've got a number of forms. Let's take a look at using a form extraction example. This is using AutoStore and the OpenForms add-in to read information which is handwritten onto a structured document, such as, in this example, an account closure form. If I take you through the form, so I've got 6 or so that I've already captured, and I shall show you what they look like. There's a form, they're filled in by hand, and we're going to read a few of the fields off here. We're going to read this account number at the top. We're going to read the reason for closing. We're going to read the payment type. We're going to check whether there is a signature present in the boxes, and we're going to try and read the dates. This is handwriting, so I'm not expecting it to be perfect, but you can see there's a number of forms that are there. So if I actually send those through to the process, so I'm using the Auto Capture desktop client to do this. See, you could scan them using the MFP or capture them in different ways, but I'm just going to use the Auto Capture process. That's now sent those documents. It's captured them in, and it's sent them through the process. AutoStore has taken them and passed them through to the OpenForms add-on. The OpenForms add-on has then done some recognition on these forms to decide that they are closure forms. What it's looking for is the closure reference form number, which is I think CLOBR. So it's looking for that. Once it's looked for that, it will then try and extract the handwritten information from each of those forms. And then eventually, the way the process is written, it's going to send everything to a validation station. So if I go to my validation station and hit refresh, you can see I've started to get some of those documents through. So there's 4 of them have appeared already. And I can start to actually validate these documents through the system. So if I look at there, you can see they're coming through. So I've got 4. So I can see each of these, and you can see the fields that have been extracted, so the reasons, etc. And I can tab through these fields to check what's been extracted. As an O is used if the field is open, a checkbox has not been marked. X shows that actually it's ticked, and I can scroll down and go through each one of these in turn, so I can see the payment types. I can see that actually payment external was ticked, and so on. And I can go through and see what's actually going on right the way down. I can see things like the signature date, 21/03/2017. I can check the sort code, and you can see here what it's extracted. It's not quite right, that's actually a 2, but because of the box it's not overly clear, so I can change that in here to a 2. It's read some of this account number, but it's not sure, so I can change it to what I think it looks like. That's an 8. That could be a 9. Very strange writing of a 9, but once I'm happy I can then pass that through and go through the process to the next form in the process. And the next one will actually come up, and again I can go through each one. I can validate all the relevant fields. I can check things like, has it been signed? So yes, there's a signature in that box, there's not a signature in that box, etc. Again, I can check the account number, the sort code, the account number details. So you see here 6084579. I think that's a 9. So 6084579, etc. So I can go through and I can validate each one of those forms as they go through, and I can check the relevant detail. Now I could actually set this up to only validate the fields that it's not too sure on and that I'm worried about, so but I want to check things. So this one hasn't read that at all, so that's a 20. So that's definitely 30. The account number looks good to me, so I can send that one forward, and I can do that with each of these 6 forms. You can see here I've got multiple checkboxes on here, so I can check that I've got 3 checked, etc. I can scroll down and again check some of the data. So you see here account numbers 44332210, etc. Sort code, so it's reading that one no problem, reading that one with no problem, and so on. And I can just pass that through, and I can go for the next one, and so on, until I'm actually happy that I've actually processed everything. So just take the account number 7934432. That looks good. The sort code is 404020. That looks good. Off we go. I think we're this is the last file, and we can look through. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. In this demo I'm only actually reading the first account number off. So I can see here the details are there. I could set it up to read the rest and pass that forward. So what's happened now is they've now been passed forward. They've gone back to AutoStore, and all that information that's been extracted has been made available to AutoStore as runtime replacement tags, which hopefully you're aware of. Within AutoStore there are variables that can be used within the process. So I could make decisions, for example, on those forms there was reasons for closing the account. And one of the reasons was policy. They didn't like the policy on the account. Now I could pass that to a team that would perhaps ring the customer up and ask them what it was they didn't like in the policy, services, pricing, etc. The actual payment types, they could be going to different teams within the bank to organize that payment. So if it's a check, I could send this slip one way. If it's an international payment, I could send it to another team. The power that you have within the AutoStore product allows you to do that. In this instance, all I'm doing is sending them to a folder, and you can see they've now appeared in this folder. They're all about the right time and date now. So I've got my closure form itself, and I've got the data that's being extracted from that form, and I've got the same one in each one. So closure form details, accounts to be closed. So there's the account number and sort code that it read, the reasoning behind it. So this one had a checkbox ticked for service and pricing. The check payment method was done, and it wasn't properly signed. So I could send it there. You can see here it's not signed, and so on. I can go through each one of these. So this was not signed in signature box 1, but signed in signature box 2. So I could perhaps I'd have a process with that where I actually check if it says it's not signed, it should be signed in signature box 1. I can check, or maybe I look up the account number in the banking system and find out if it's a dual signature account, and if it is, if only one is signed, I can send it to a different account, a different process, etc. But that's forms recognition example, and help you that showed you what it's capable of. So let's look now at an additional final one. Let's look at the unstructured document processing. So what we're doing here again is we're scanning documents. These are letters. We're going to identify that it's a letter. We're going to extract the address from it. We're going to then store the documents actually in a text file. We're going to store the document actually in a folder based on the sender of the document with the document. So if we look at what we can do with an information extraction of an unstructured document, we can actually extract customer details based on the address. Obviously, we can find correspondence dates. We can find reference numbers. We can route to the correct person based on the deal line, etc. So there's a number of things we can do once we identify the document as that type. So if we look at this now as a process, okay, let's have a look now at dealing with unstructured documents. What we have in this quick demonstration is basically dealing with correspondence coming into a business, and in simple terms, all I'm going to do is we're going to capture the documents. We're going to identify who sent the documents in based on their address, extract their name, and for the example here, we're just going to store them in a directory based on the sender's name. So you can see here, I've got nothing in my correspondence directory, but I've got a number of letters. And if I just show you those letters. I've got letters from Dave Edmund, from a Lonnie Story, a Patricia Dill, etc., Miguel, Carl, Sandra, and so on. And they're all different letters, but they're all a letter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them through to address extraction process. So what this is doing is it's taking them through. Again, it's taking them through into AutoStore via the auto capture component, so capturing it from the desktop. AutoStore is then passing it to the OpenForms. OpenForms is doing a document recognition and classification to type the documents, and it'll type them as a correspondence. Once it's done that, it actually knows to actually look in the top of the letter for an address format, and in this case, actually, as these examples are all American addresses in an American address format. And from there, it will then extract the address and take out the name of the person that has sent the letter. And you can see here as it's starting now, I've now got directories for Dave Edmund, Laurie Story, and Patricia Dill, and I'll continue to get directories until it's actually processed all the documents that are there. There's a number of documents for each person, but eventually I should get all my people in here. So I'm getting Carl now, so I think I'm just missing Sandra. And then we're complete. So that's an example of actually extracting those documents, and you can see in here, there we go, there's Sandra. In each of these I've got a letter, there's my correspondence, so this was Sandra. So if I just open up that PDF and show you that this is a Sandra Ramirez letter that's come into the business. So there's a second one there that's come in as well, because there's a number of things. There's 11 letters, so eventually I'll get 11 letters stored in these directories. So that's a quick example of using unstructured data. Okay, we've now looked at example processes. We've seen the solution overview and why it benefits them. Let's look at how the licenses are built up. OpenForms is an add-on to AutoStore, therefore it requires AutoStore licenses to be present as well. We're not really going to discuss that in here, but obviously the AutoStore licenses are device licenses, auto capture, web capture, and mobile licenses, file import licenses, our Quick Capture Pro licenses, etc. So you need those licenses to get AutoStore up. When you've got AutoStore running, you can then go into the modular licensing that are available for OpenForms 360. The OpenForms 360 license is page count based per year or per month. Currently it's 30,000 pages per year or 2,500 pages per month, depending on which license you actually order, and those licenses can be purchased in multiple quantities to give you the page count required. There are two elements that you must have, and that's the gateway license, which is a per server license, and that allows the AutoStore server to talk to the OpenForms 360 server. and you must have the classification license to allow OpenForms to classify documents into document types. You then need to decide how many fields are actually being extracted from the documents that you're actually pulling in, and you can buy the relevant field license of 1 field, 3, 6, 10, or unlimited field extraction. The optional extraction modules that you have are table extraction. So if you need to pull out a table from a document, perhaps a delivery note has a list of things that have been delivered, or a purchase order has a list of items that have been purchased, you can pull those out using the table extraction. The unstructured example we've just looked at uses the address extraction license to find addresses in a document and extract them. And you also have extraction via database or text lookup. This allows the extraction of data based on records that are found in a tab delimited flat file database. The other optional modules are obviously the handprint detection and the validation clients. The only element on the validation client is per user, per concurrent user, rather than a page count. If you're moving forward and actually using something like the invoice header, then the invoice header extraction license, which is available on the price book, actually includes the unlimited field extraction, address extraction, and extraction via text lookup. And it includes those so that it can actually do the extractions correctly for the invoice black box module. So address extraction and extraction via lookup are used to find the supplier of that invoice, or the vendor details, etc. The additional bundle that's available on the price list is invoice header and line item, and that then gives you the addition of the table extraction so that you can pull tables out of the process. When you're creating a quote for it, there are a number of questions that you can do. So the first question, obviously, with it having a page count, is how many pages per year are actually going to be processed. That will give you the number of licenses that you actually require. The next question to ask is this invoice extraction? If it's invoice extraction, we're going to go to the right and say, is this header or header and line item? Once we've made that decision, we only have 2 more questions to ask ourselves, and that is, do we want handprint recognition, and do we need validation clients? Once we've decided on those, that's the OpenForms elements licenses decided on, and we just need to decide on what the auto capture process will be and what licenses are required there. If it's not invoice extraction, then we come down the process and we have to decide what the maximum number of fields per page is going to be extracted, so that we can decide whether we want the 1, 3, 6, 10 or unlimited field extraction. We then also have the question of, do we actually need tables to be extracted? Do we need addresses to be extracted? And is extraction by DB or text lookup required? Once we've decided on those, we've obviously got we drop to the same question as, do we need handprint, do we need validation, and then do we need the process? So for example, if we were looking at this now, if we wanted to process invoice headers, we would look at the number of pages. Perhaps we need 300,000 pages, and we need invoice extraction, so we need 300 pages of the classification license, 300,000 pages worth of the invoice header extraction. We probably don't want handprint recognition. We might want a couple of validation clients on there, and then we are going to capture from perhaps some MFDs in the finance department, so we'd need the MFD device licenses. So that's an example of how you would actually go through and actually create a quote. So we've looked at it now. We've looked at the business pains that we're addressing. We've looked at the actual overview of the solution and its architecture and where it fits. We've seen some process examples for structured documents, such as the account closing form, for semi-structured documents of invoices, and for unstructured documents using the correspondence. But there are a number of use cases that OpenForms and AutoStore is ideal for. So let's look at them via the various marketplaces. So obviously financial services accounts payable is the big element that we've looked at. It's critical for financial records to be accurate and complete. Supplier invoice forms differ and can change without notice, and data needs to be extracted and populated into accounting systems quickly to make best possible use of cash flow savings. and it make them efficient and know what the cash flow is. We look at customer services and customer relationship manager. Again, it's critical to maintain customer records accurately and completely. Customers often send in paper documents, application forms, claim forms, correspondence, etc. These must be filed and processed to the correct customer, extracting useful metadata, the customer name, finding the customer number, what the document type is, whether there's a contract or a policy number on there, etc. We've got banking, so customer onboarding and account management. Again, the same applies for all of these. Records must be accurate and must be complete. Banks, although a lot of banks are modernising, they're still using paper documents for a lot of elements. Application forms for new bank accounts, change forms, as we saw in this example, account closure forms, correspondence, etc. They must be filed, they must be processed correctly, they must extract meaningful metadata such as the account number or the account name and the document type, and process them fast and efficient. Business processes for human resources. Using electronic personnel files is the most efficient way to enhance performance in a HR department. It can be complex due to the large number of different documents or different document processes. Documents that can exist in several formats and locations with different processes being carried out, and processing of these documents, extracting the correct metadata for routing and storage to the correct employee is essential. You cannot, under the Data Protection Act and the new general data protection regulations that come into force in 2018, it's essential that personally identifiable information is kept secure and not mixed up or stand the chance of actually going to the wrong person. And AutoStore and OpenForms is ideal way of digitizing it and digitizing the process. But also the fact that data can be extracted, for example, from an application form, that data can be used where you have a business process or a HR process that perhaps needs additional clearance. So employees may have to apply for a CRB check or a CTC check or other types of security checks. Those require forms to be completed. Well, if you've extracted that data, AutoStore can use that data to automatically populate forms and create the form for you. All part of automating the business process. We look at customer services and insurance claims. Insurance customers report claims either by forms or in free-form letters. The customers and the claim need to be identified, data extracted, which can then be used to populate the claim processing system and allow insurance specialists to focus on the customer service and not the data. In this world, customer service is key. Getting the data into the right systems as fast as possible without the need to keep rekeying is crucial. And obviously legal services, looking at electronic discovery, capturing documents must provide their textual contents in order to be found in the case. OM360 and AutoStore can handle thousands of documents, classify them as the correct record type, and provide them in a secure electronic format. So going back to where we started, and we're looking at the actual proposition. So the proposition that we've discussed within this e-learning is the value proposition of using AutoStore with the OpenForms 360 add-on to collect documents and data from multiple sources, to recognize, separate, classify, and extract information using automated processes of OCR, ICR, and IDR to get that data into business processes where it can be managed efficiently and succinctly before it's passed into business applications. That will then provide us with this automation benefits that we saw at the beginning. To reduce operating costs, improve information quality, accurate business processes, and full compliance and security enablement. Thank you. This is now the end of the e-learning.